it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. We recently introduced the Star of Wonder Nativity Club that has these darling ornaments and plus one more, our angel here on set. So many of you fell in love with those just like I did because it speaks to our heart, right? Christmas is about Jesus's birth, and yes, we love our Santa and we love our Rudolph. That's fun too. But we want to always remember the true reason for this amazing celebration that we call Christmas. And I love that Nancy Halvorsen Star of Wonder book that she created so many years ago with that collection has a book chock full of projects, including these ornaments. This is the original fabrics they were made in. And a lot of time passed, and I am so happy that Nancy Halvorsen brought back most of that collection with some new things added to it. Now I think it's called Star of Wonder, and Star of Light, her new collection with Better Text. And these are the ornaments that you're seeing here based on her previous book. We couldn't resist having a club. And again, so many of you have signed up for that. Just a review of what you can expect. And then I'm going to take you into a tutorial. So if you've been thinking, oh, it's maybe too difficult, nope, not even. Grab something to drink, a snack, take a break if you need to. I'm going to unpack what you can expect and show you how easy these are to make. And you might want to even get a second program if you've already even signed up once, maybe one to have and one to give. I know there's people in my life that are now engaged to be married. How amazing to start a couple off with some handcrafted ornaments by you. They mean something, right? They'll cherish forever. So as you would expect, all of the shapes that are applique will be prefused and laser cut for you. That's courtesy of Nancy Halvorsen allowing us to do that. This is her genius. She's an incredible designer for Art to Heart as well as for Benatex, who prints her fabrics. So we're so grateful for that, to be able to skip the tracing, skip the cutting, and be able to just focus in on the fun. Not only is the applique prefused and laser cut, we have also pre-cut all of your backgrounds. We don't normally do that, but we went to absolutely the nth degree to make this so fun so that these can easily be done by Christmas of 2024. If you stay on top of it, you can get them all done. We took it a step further. This is called fusible fleece. It's fusible on one side. It's got the fleece on the other. This is also pre-cut for you. You literally, I don't even know why that's on here. We can put that off to the side because we've already done all of that for you. We actually just need to cut out one little piece later on when we get ready to do the tie kind of on our shepherd's, his headpiece there. But we'll get to that a little bit later. So what you can expect each month, of course, is to get your book. And in your first shipment, you're going to be getting your angel. You'll also be getting any buttons or embellishments surrounding that project. And then in subsequent months, you'll be getting 2 ornaments per month. And this is kicking off in September of 2024. So we're right here. So if this is you, head over to the website for sure. Take a friend with you and grab your spot. The other things you're going to want to pick up at that point is going to be the thread set. That is what we use to stitch down all of the applique shapes to the background. Because remember that fusible shapes are just temporary. It's heat and bond light. It's meant to be there temporarily, just long enough to get to that sewing machine to stitch that down permanently. And that's what that is all about. And for that reason, that's why we recommend the super non-stick size 80 needle, specifically engineered for fusible products like Heat and Bond, Steam Seam, and all the other brands that have a fusible characteristic to them. And that's the super non-stick size 80 again. We'll go through all the needles as we use them. Well, let's kind of get going here so you can see the process. The light box is going to be very important to me because I want to be able to pre-assemble my shapes and bring them onto my star background as completed units. For this reason, and per Nancy's permission, and this is something that is for our program only, we ask that you respect that Nancy's designs they're from her heart. She's put so much effort into this. She's allowed us to produce a layout diagram helping you know and see where all of the shapes go once they're combined. This has been created for our program specifically and exclusively. So we do ask that if you've got somebody that maybe just has the book, we recommend that you remember that you've invested in this program and this is for you and really for you alone. And that's again to respect Nancy's intellectual property and all the amazing work she's done to bring us books of this caliber and so much more. So when we have our layout diagram, that's letting us know where everything's going to go. That outermost line is the footprint of where our star shape fits perfectly. And because this was exactly cut out on a laser, isn't that amazing that that fits perfectly? I love that. But for now, we're going to set those things aside so that we can focus just on our applique shapes. Notice there's numbers there helping you to know what piece goes down first. So let's just bring out our shapes so we can kind of review that. And you can see, again, this is all perfectly cut out for you. To remove the paper, just give it a good crease. You don't need to be shy about trying to get that fusible off the back. And you can see this is very shiny because we have added the heat and bond light to the back of these fabrics with professional heat presses. So we get a full transfer, a nice clean transfer here. So you can see piece one would go down first. And notice how her dress and all of the shapes, her wings, are going all the way into the seam allowance, which is fantastic, right? It just locks everything in here, just like that. And it just makes everything so secure. It also means when we get ready to stitch everything down with our thread set, you don't need to stitch across the bottom or anything that's in the seam allowance because that will already be cut up for you. We only need to worry really about stitching around the areas that are not caught in the seam allowance. So shape one goes down, followed by shape 2, 3, and 4. And you can see that for the most part, you can kind of just do this, but remember that I can't iron to my paper because my fabric would now be stuck to that. So what does that mean for us? This is where we introduce our Appliqué mat. Because you have your diagram, the first thing I recommend that you do, because remember it's going to be on top of our light box covered up with the Appliqué mat, as you'll see shortly, take a photo of that. You just have something to reference. You can just prop that up in your sewing room, and that way when you get ready to put your shapes down, you have something to be able to reference. So let me just make a little bit of space here. By the way, I should have mentioned these hangers. These are by Akfelt. This is an amazing company. They create these by hand. I just think it's such a special touch. I love that it just adds to the kind of vintage look, that kind of country look that I just think it's very special. You can obviously hang up the ornaments with just the ribbon, which we've provided in your kit. But if you love that, again, that kind of just more vintage look, be sure to pick up those hangers. It does take Akfelt a while to make those. So if that's you, go ahead and pick those up. We want to make sure we're giving Akfelt plenty of notice if we do need to order more of those for our customers. So let's bring over our light box. This is by Daylight. This is called a wafer 1. This is their smallest light box. There's a wafer 2 and a wafer 3. So if you do applique and that's your world, you might want a bigger light box. But for our project, the wafer 1 is a nice size. And this is the smaller Appliqué mat by the Gypsy Quilter. They also make different size mats. This is all we need for our project. So that's what I'll be using with you today. Get your iron heating up to a medium heat, because remember that as quilters, we are on the hottest setting that we can get because we want good seams pressed open, right, or to the side, or however we're pressing. We want our blocks to be good and flat. Fusible applique products, heat and bond, steam and seam, and really all the others don't like that maximum heat, and they prefer a more medium heat. Just something to kind of start shifting your mind to if you don't applique that frequently. It's something easily forgotten. So as we have our light box in front of us and we have our layout diagram, really the magic of being able to bond those layers together happens with the Appliqué mat. And you'll be able to see that once I put that down, my vision is now diminished, and that's why I recommended you take that photo of your layout diagram. You're like, oh yeah, I see what you're saying, Jen. Go ahead and take that photo, and now you'll be able to reference that. And I'm just going to move my shapes over here so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Once I put this on top, as such, and turn my light box on, now I begin to place my shapes down. The other thing I love about the Appliqué mat is there is a grip to this mat. There are other things on the market, you may have seen them, you might even own them, called applique sheets. And it is exactly what they said. It's sheer, it's sheet, and it's very slippery. I can literally lift this up and this isn't going anywhere. That grip acts like another pair of hands. I love that I can now rely on that shape not being bumped. I've done that so many times I can't even count it on both hands. Or just in the action of moving it, I've bumped something and you're taking things off, realigning your first piece because everything's laying on top of that. That's not happening with the Appliqué mat. Now, I've also heard, I've never tried this yet, that grip, if you don't keep that rolled up and secured, again, this is called the slap and wrap peels. This is why we now use these on this and things like stabilizer and other things that want to unroll, is we discovered when this thing was just laying out flat, it was getting dusty. It just happens, right? Our houses get dusty, buildings get dusty, and we were losing that tackiness. If that does happen, they say you can put this through a wash in your dishwasher and it'll be returned to its tackiness. I have not tried that. That's my disclaimer, but that's what they say. But here's the moral of the story. Keep it wrapped up with a slap and wrap peel, rubber band, whatever that is, so that it doesn't get filled with dust. Okay, next shape is going down, which is her wing. And if you're like, I don't know where my camera is, I didn't take a photo of that. It's okay to just look, oh, okay, piece number 3 is her face. Now, I'm going to show you this, but I'm also going to take this off here shortly because notice how there's a little bit of embroidery right here that's going across her face. I want to mark that in advance of putting everything together. I would rather be able to see that and mark that now if I have a permanent pen, or if you're okay doing that later, just visually looking at your diagram and drawing that in, you can do that then. That's why I have on set with me a Micron pen. So if that was you and you're like, nope, I'm not comfortable with that freehand, then what I would recommend that you do at this point is take this now directly to the diagram with your Micron pen and you're drawing in those shapes. Just remember, this is a permanent pen. This is not coming off with heat the way that it does with a friction pen. Notice how light I've drawn. That's all we need to do. So I wanted to make sure to point that out to you. I'm not comfortable with freehand. I wanted to be exactly where those lines should be because I know the result I'm going for. Now I'm not wondering if the lines are where they should be. I would rather take that time now to pre-mark my shape. So I just have to reline this back up with my diagram. Once I'm there, I'll place this down. Of course, our angel's playing her trumpet. That's what angels do. Okay. On goes her arm and her hand. Let me make sure I've got this in the right order. Pretty sure I do. Nope. The hand goes down first, and that makes sense. So see how I thought I remembered, and I didn't. Now, I don't have the benefit of a photo here, That's why when I do applique with layout diagrams, every time I take a photo. At least every time at home, right? So let's put her hand down. And then we'll put her sleeve down. Okay. Once that's done, there's no harm in just taking this and going, okay, did I get this right? You obviously can look in your book as well. Once you're happy, this is coming and just walk away. You don't want to do any of this action of movement. We're so used to doing that. I told you before, when I was flying all the time, my shirt had to be perfect. And that was on a 4 or 5 day trip, right? So you've got my first shirt that I was wearing looked beautiful, but the other ones in my bag were folded up. And every night I was ironing and I was doing this. That took me a long time to break that habit as a quilter because I'm just used to doing that. Once you've had that on there 6-7 seconds, you're going to want to let that go ahead and cool down. So let's just let that cool down, and I'll be right back as we continue on. At this point, what we'll be doing, just to give you a heads up, you're going to want to go grab some polyfill. You're also going to want to grab some needles. So let's just talk real quick about these embellishments, and these are what you can be expecting to receive. Look how tiny the holes of that are. For that reason, we use something called a straw needle. Now, while these packages look identical, they're not. Richard Hemming is really this incredible manufacturer of needles. The size 4 is a chunkier needle that we'll be using to doing a lot of our backstitch, our French knots, but being able to thread through seed beads and these tiny little buttons, you're going to want to have what's called a straw needle. And in this case, the size 10 or 11 Richard Hemming, or whatever you have at home, something really fine, you're going to be needing that to be able to get through the tiny holes of those handcrafted buttons there. So I definitely wanted to mention that. All right, I have a feeling that our shapes have merged as one. When I get ready to remove these, I just kind of start at one side and kind of peel it away. And what was once now 6 different shapes has merged into one, and that is the magic. Here's the other magic. It leaves 0 residue on our Appliqué mat. It is ready to go again. We have used this Appliqué mat probably almost every day for the last 3-4 years, and it's in exactly the same condition. It's not lost any of its tackiness. So if you have not invested in that or Lightbox, just do it. You are going to find so many reasons to use this combination of the Lightbox and the Appliqué mat. Once we have that, now we'll bring out our background. And this is where we will probably can even just bring this right to this location, because remember that we seated that exactly where it should be. Now, let's see if we can even see through that a little bit. Actually, I can see that. But remembering that this is going to be in the seam allowance, you can kind of see there really isn't another place for this to be. But it's nice having that confirmation that, yes, I'm in the right location. Once you're happy with that, and trying to not bump that, now we take it back over to the iron, ironing it down. Move that. Again, 5, 6, 7 seconds until everything is ironed down. So that is our angel. Now, you've got a couple things to do. This is when you would be using your thread set to stitch around all of your shapes. This is also when you would be doing your hand embroidery. So I'm going to talk you through the hand embroidery of this because this is the natural step. Now, as we look at this here, we do see that there's just a little bit more of this lighter kind of line that's wrapping around her. I don't think we're going to be able to see that with our light box, even on maximum, just because it's so delicate. But the fact that we have our line here, I'll go ahead and use my friction pen at this point to just be able to kind of continue that. I'll put some dots here for my French knots, continue it over here, and a little bit of a French knot there. Next, I'll explain what we're going to be doing, and then we'll be demonstrating that. I'll be using my Richard Hemming size 4 needle, and it will be doing a back stitch here to create her halo. And we'll also be learning our French knots here. Very straightforward, very simple. I'm going to show you that if you're like, you know what, I'm a lefty, or I want something else to reference, by all means, this is a fantastic resource, the Embroidery and Crazy Quilt Stitch Tool. We've probably sold thousands of these. Why? Because it's great to have that library. Maybe you're at a quilt retreat, or maybe you're at a location where you just don't want to watch a video. You want to have something that you can be able to reference. You're left-handed, or at stitches we've never even covered. I love also that it sits on your table, just like this, that it's like a recipe book. I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on this stitch today. I love that. Left-handed, right-handed, and it's propped up because you're stitching, right? You don't have to lean down and read a book that's flat on the table. So I really think of all the references I've ever seen for embroidery, I think this is leading the market and one of the best resources that's ever been produced. So thank you for Judith Baker Montano's, genius. You have over 180 stitches for needles, thread, ribbon, fabric, and so much more. So we'll go ahead and change our camera position so you can see what I'll be doing as I'm demonstrating how to do that back stitch as well as the French knot. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be doing a little bit of back stitching here. Let me get you to that ornament so you can see that. Some French knots for the eye, beading very straightforward. We can use the red in our thread set, and you're just really securing each one of those beads. The other thing I realized we need just a little bit of a tutorial on is actually on the nose of the kitty. So we'll be doing just a touch of a satin stitch. Very easy to do. I'm going to be using all 3 size needles. I'll be starting off with the Richard Hemming size 4 for the back stitch as well as the French knots. Probably using that straw needle is what I would be using to attach the beads, and definitely any specialty buttons on the other ornaments. And then we're going to be using our thicker embellishing needle because we're also going to show you how to do the straw that is included on our manger, and we have done a little bit of that, but we'll show you how we're doing that. And we're actually using Lori Holt's, what she calls chunky thread, which is kind of just a smaller kind of diameter yarn. So we'll be covering that as well. All right, let's start off with our green because we know that is really what our halo is going to start off with. And I've got 2-3 strands. You can that all depends on how thick you want this to be. If you're looking for a daintier look, you might want 2 strands. If you want a bulkier look, you might want 3. And I'm just going to start off here off to the side. And remember, this is curving really constantly, meaning we need to take some pretty small stitches to create that illusion of a curve. And I think what I'll actually do is I'm going to actually hop over to the angel's face. It's going to be easier for you to see what I'm doing. So I'll just going to hop over here and we'll start off on this edge. I would definitely start here and travel to the other side, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So let's just come off this. Let's pretend we'd stitched all of that, and we'll start here. And never be afraid to turn the project so it's in the orientation most natural for you. I probably pivot and turn a project many, many times, so I'm in the optimal position, just what I'm comfortable with and what's going to produce the best result for this stitch. Now, keep in mind, and we didn't want to take the time to do the machine embroidery. We just did straight stitching definitely get everything sewn down with the coordinating 50 weight thread set. Stitch all of that applique down really before you start doing the hand embroidery. You want everything locked down, especially as we sew the back on and we turn this through, because you can see these shapes aren't really locked down. They're temporarily there, but nothing like when they're stitched down. So we're a little bit out of sequence of how this would normally happen, but I didn't want to take the time to just stitch around the edge, pretty boring for you to see. We just are echoing that edge, as I said, all the way around every single shape. No mystery here. You can certainly do that by hand if you wish. We thought we would do that by machine and did do that way. All right, you get the idea. I'm taking very small stitches. And I'm just going back to where I had just come up from. And you're just continuing around. And I think I must have three strands of embroidery floss here. It's a little bit of a chunkier look. And that's okay. I like that to showcase. So you get the idea. We just kind of maneuver our way all the way around, going down and coming back, going down and coming back. Avoiding the temptation of going too far downstream, and then we come back. Right? And then we would, of course, continue on, and you're going to want to just tie off in the back. All right, let's talk about French knots here. I'm just going to clip that, get that out of the way. With our French knots, again, the bulkier your thread, the bigger the diameter of the eye. I have 2 strands here. And I'll just start off with doing 2 wraps. There's a knot in the end coming up, exactly in the middle of that dot. Embroidery floss goes off to the left. If you're right-handed, needles in the front, wrap twice around, and then pivot to go back down where you came up. It's awkward to do. It's one of those ones that's normally very close to me, but you can't see that on video. A little awkward to do when it's extended away from me, but you get the idea. And let me show you that again. Come up. I would always be holding the project. If you want to just have your hands free, though, you can set it down, floss to the side, 1 and 2, and wrap, putting the needle right where we had come up, scooting down those knots. And notice I'm keeping this taut over here. Don't let go. Hang on to that as you push the needle through. And I let go only at the last second, and that's how we make our French knots. And that's the same really around her halo. And then, of course, you're tying off very shallow in the background twice, tie off twice, and clip your thread. Beading, super simple. That red thread, again, you're coming up. I'll just demonstrate that pretty quick. That one's probably pretty straightforward. If you've ever sewn on a button, it's really the same concept. So let's say we want to have a bead right here. I'm just coming up. It's nice if they're in a dish. I just reach right into the dish, scoop one up, come right here, come back down. And I wouldn't hesitate to travel over to the next place. You don't need to tie off each one of these. Now you might want to, for security, tie off, but not cut your thread. You create the knot, but you still keep traveling. You can always do that. That way, if something does happen along the way, along the ears, maybe it catches on a branch, you're only going to be losing that bead because you did create knots on the back, but you don't have to necessarily cut your thread. You can just keep going, putting the next bead on here, for example. You get the idea. Okay, that's how we do our back stitch, our French knots and beading. Let's just touch real quick on the satin stitch for the kitty's nose. It's a small little nose, so it's easy to do. Generally, whenever I'm doing a satin stitch, the first thing that I do is I just outline the shape of what it is I'm wanting to fill in. Kind of like when we were kids, right? You generally color better in between the lines if you define the lines first. Outline it with some nice back stitch. And then you just come back in. And the goal is to completely fill the area with thread, floss in this case, and just fill it in. And you can see, because it's such a tiny little nose, it fills in very, very quickly. That's all there is to doing a satin stitch. And then just like before, you're getting in the back, going very shallow through the very stitching you just created and tying off once and twice. Okay. The next thing I want to show you that we did, it's really a lot of fun, is actually the hay that is on our manger, our baby Jesus, the star of the show. And we have these. If you have any problem pushing through this thicker needle, this is our embellishing needle. If you have any problem threading that, you can use the Clover needle threader. But unlike the other needles that I threaded, there's no knot in the end of this. So you're not gonna have a knot. And that seems a little weird to you, but here's how we're going to do this. We're going to come down. You'd of course start here, and we've already got some going so you could see it. So you'll go down and just leave this longer than it needs to be. You're going to flip around to the back, going very shallow, so you're not coming to the front. You're kind of back in the meat of this fusible fleece. And we're just going to create a little loop and create a little bit of a knot there. So that's now anchored. What that does is it allows you to come back out, a beam that, and we'll just cut that. Now, what we discovered, and you can do this with your needle, to make it look kind of like hay, kind of like it's frayed, we just put our needle in this and just kind of dragged. We're trying to mess it up a little bit. So it looks like a little bit frayed, kind of fun. Do it as much as you want, as little as you want, whatever that is, and then you just cut it to the length you want. Right? So again, now, don't tie a knot. We go down. We'll do it one more time. Leave it longer than you need. Come to the back. Create a little loop. Create a knot. Flip it around. Come beam that. Give it a good pull. Get your length, right? Messy, messy with your needle. Go ahead and give it a trim. And that's all we did all the way across here to mimic our hay. All right, I'm going to clean this up just a bit. Two of our ornaments have kind of a dimensional mustache. So I'll clean up just a bit, and then we'll go over that as we continue our tutorial. Okay, so our table's cleaned up, and before we move on to the dimensional mustaches, I want to talk real quick about the buttons, because as you know, many of these have buttons. It's better to attach the buttons before we kind of create our backing and turn this whole thing through, right? You want to be able to attach those right now. And our buttons have these kind of little bit of these grooves in that. Makes it so nice. Maybe use 2 strands of thread or go through that a couple of times to secure the button well and tie off. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I did touch on that. So let's look at our mustaches. A lot of fun, a lot of dimension. Inside the book, you'll see the mustache shape. So you'll get your fabric. This has been folded in half. Yours will, of course, will be a nice square. You'll just need to trace that one time on the lower portion of that and fold that in half and sew that with right sides together. Once you have that, we simply cut around that. And that's what we have here, and hopefully you can see that stitching. We want to just make a little bit of a snip right there on just one side, but not all the way through to the back, right? The whole idea is this is where we're going to turn this through. So once you're sure you have just one side of that, you'll want to turn this through. Okay, his mustache is turned through. I am the first person to admit that was a lot of work, and that was not easy because it's so tiny. So if you're like, what is wrong with me? It's not you. It's very small. It's a small opening. It's a lot of bulk. I could not do this without the clover point turner. I actually tried something else, a little bit of a scissor there, and about poked a hole through this thing. So if you're like, that was a lot of work. One thing you might do at home before you get to this fabric in your kit, if you're following along with me, is get a scrap piece of fabric, trace the mustache, do exactly what I said, right side together, sew along, make the slit and turn it through. Try that. If you're like, that was not fun, I don't want to do it like that. One thing you might do that could be really cute as well, if you have a pinking shear that makes just a tiny little pinked edge, is you could actually have that with wrong sides together, sew around the mustache. Now you just clip that with your pinking shears, and then you move on to the step that I'm doing right now. The mustache would be a little bit jagged on the edge, but maybe that would be something of interest. But it's obviously achievable. We did it. It just took longer than I thought it would. So once that's done, now we really kind of bunch up. I'm just going to come up through the middle. You can really kind of do this any way you want, but the point being that we need to bunch the mustache up in the middle, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a trying to get the thread all the way in the middle, just like that. Once I have that where I want it to be, I'm just going to actually go down and kind of secure all of that. And then I take that to my project. And once again, I'm going just right down through the project a couple of times, right? For sure, a couple of times. And sewing and tying off in the back. This is where those thimbles might be handy. I love these thimbles because the pack actually has both sizes, and I can't get traditional thimbles to fit they just don't. I don't know what it is, but this is a really nice thing. Also, my nail is free. Just a great resource. So you get the idea, and then of course tie off. And the same thing you'll be doing for the other mustache. Once we have all of the stitching done, all of the buttons, all of the beads, sewn on, now it's time to use the fusible fleece and our backing and to be able to put our ornament together. So one of the things that I want to do at this point, and we're going to pretend like everything is on, is we'll grab our fusible fleece and begin to, that's right, our buttons are not sewn on yet, but we're going to pretend that they are. I'd be avoiding any contact of your iron with the beads. Now, theoretically, they tell us they're glass beads, but just in the event they're not, I would avoid that contact. Place this directly on the project in iron. All the way and make great contact. The next thing, and this is something unique that we actually added to our kits, is the ribbon. So notice how in the original version of when Nancy did this, she used the ack felt hangers, and it's almost like a little metal hook here that she stitched to the top. Hopefully you can see that right there. in order to give you an option so that you didn't have to purchase the metal hangers if that doesn't work for your decor style. We did provide this beautiful gold ribbon in there. So what I'm about to show you is not in this book because that's just not the approach she took. We thought this was nice to provide that as an option. And then if you choose to add these on just as a really cool decor element, you can do that, right? And they come on and off these hangers as you desire. So this is one of those things where I'm like, make it work. These are just a few suggestions of really how we would recommend that you do this. We know that with your ribbon, we want it to be hanging straight off the very top. So we want this to be as much in this V as possible. And we know that if we actually do this like this could be problematic because it can get caught in the seam allowance. So you kind of almost have to stack the two ends on top of each other and put them in place. You could even glue those in place. And that's really why the glue is on set with us here today and I have just a little bit of glue that I've actually got because I was using this earlier. I'm just going to take a little bit off of that here. That if you do want to take that approach, take any twist out of your ribbon and just kind of glue that into position, even if you're a little bit higher than your top of your star, you can always trim that away. Stack them exactly, and I'm going to go sew that right now. So you can see that's now in place, and because we went straight down, when we come in later on with our backing, we're not going to be trapping that. So later on, this will hang straight up. Now, if you did extend above, as I did, you could go ahead and trim that away. We don't need any extra bulk up there. Got enough going on here. Because remember, we'll be adding the fusible fleece, we'll be adding a polyfill, etc. But that's going to allow us to later on be able to do that. Now, if you like the look of what's in the book, you could, of course, grab the hangers and potentially at a hardware store, that extra little element that she's included that is between the hanger and here, you could, of course, stitch that to the top. That's really your option, and we'd love to know what option you decide to take. Okay, once we have our ribbon in place and secure, now will come your backing, and we'll be right side together, and you need to figure out where do you want to leave an opening, and we need a good size opening. Definitely pin this. We want this footprint to be exactly one on top of the other. You could have your blue in there, thread for your blue ornaments, and or a gray, I've got a gray, whichever I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and leave my opening here. What's very important is don't ever finish the corner and start, so you're leaving your opening here. I would not leave that entire corner undone. I at least start it. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. We're going to leave a good size, I'm going to turn that corner and probably stop right about there and stop right about here. And we'll turn through this side. Make sure you back stitch well here. I'm even going to sew on a shortened stitch length, maybe a 2-0, because when I start stuffing this, I don't want any of that stuffing coming out. I want this to stay together. Back stitch. We'll back stitch here, sew around, stop here, and we'll turn there. All right, I'll get everything pinned, and I'll join you at the sewing machine. All right, so I'm going to start a little before that, just a little bit, stop and pivot in this direction. And I'm back stitching. I want to reinforce that. Now we stop and sew 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay, now Nancy also tells us to clip our corners and curves just to provide a little more ease and smoothness. So kind of right there in those corners here, you might want to just kind of carve out a little bit of that bulk, maybe ease that around those points. I wouldn't do too much carving away of this 1/4 inch right there where the opening is, but the other areas, yeah, I'm gonna kind of carve that out just a little bit to your comfort level. This is another reason I sewed on a shorter stitch length is, you know, I'm now getting closer to my seam allowance. I want more integrity with more thread in the fabric with a shorter stitch length because I don't have a 1/4 inch away from that everywhere. I'm getting closer to that. And of course, we want these ornaments holding up well over the years. And here, I'm going to carve that out as well. Just seems to help those points come out a little bit sharper. I think that's probably pretty good. Maybe trim that off a little bit. Okay, made myself a little mess. The point turner, again, if you're going to jump into this program and you don't have a really good point turner, the Clover point turner is it because it not only has the point but also has the curve. Because sometimes when we sew a circle, we need to smooth that out, and that's what this other end is. Most other things on the market are only the point turner. They don't have the curve as well. So I love that this does both. Now, this is another reason why you would have obviously wanted to already have stitched this down. So hopefully when I pull this through, some of the applique isn't lifting up because remember, I did not take that time knowing this was already going to be a longer video showing you all the steps along the way of the various details of how to make the project. So I'm going to start turning this through with my fingers, and then everything's going to come out nice and pointy when I get that point turner involved here. But I start off with first getting my fingers going. Avoid pulling on that lame ribbon. That could break. It's fairly delicate. All right, so I'm going to start using my point turner. And once I get this all turned through, I'll give everything a nice, good press, and then we'll move on. One thing I want to encourage you to do before you start stuffing that ornament, because it's going to be a lot easier to do, of tucking in that edge that you'll ultimately need to hand sew closed. It's so much easier to do that now than when this is stuffed, is to just start kind of encouraging that edge over, right? Can't really get to it once it's got some polyfill inside. And the same thing with the other side of that. Rolling that inward. And giving that a press. So we'll just grab our polyfill, and you know, I've stuffed a lot of things over the year, and my worst habit is I'm just cramming a bunch of it in there. We want to be able to get little bits of it into those points of our star, so it takes a little bit of time to do a really good job with that, but it really does help, and you can use your point turner to get the polyfill in those points. So just put little bits in at a time to get your points filled, and then you can be putting in a little bit bigger pieces of that. Let's get them out and filling out those points of our stars. While I'm filling this in, you'll want to grab your Richard Hemming size 4 again, and depending on the color of the background and the backing, you'll choose that thread color because we're going to want to close this opening and be as discreet as possible. So that's another great reason to pick up that thread set, is you'll have those exact matching colors for the backgrounds and the backings that we've used. I also did a nice long strand and then brought both ends of that up and threaded my needle because I want 2 strands of thread as I secure that opening with as subtle of a stitch as I can, a blind stitch, whatever that favorite stitch is that you like to use to be able to close an opening and be really, it's not noticed, right? That's one of the reasons that I also put it on the bottom and obviously not on the top, because as you can see, everyone's focused on this and the back kind of just curves away. The bottom portion just kind of curves away. So I would avoid anything on the top being your opening. Of course, do something on the bottom. Once you're satisfied with the amount of polyfill, as I mentioned, I had gone ahead and had a long length, brought both ends of that up and threaded this needle. This created a loop down here, which is desirable because I really don't want to have a knot at this point. So as you come into the project, you can decide whether you want to start here and work your way there or vice versa. I'll just start down here. I'm just going to come up very shallow initially because all I'm trying to do at first is go through that loop and just secure this. This helped me avoid having to make a knot that might be unsightly. So this is very discreet at this point. I'm going to come from the back and pick up just as little bit of the front as possible because of course that applique right there is not teal, it's cream. So I'm trying to not let that be seen as I continue all the way down. And I'm just kind of turning this under as I go. It's just one of those things in sewing, crafting, that I call just make it work, right? Just make it work. It takes a little bit of time, but the results are worth it. Now, one of the things that you can do is kind of on the back of the ornament when you're ready to tie off, I do a couple of knots, kind of come under this. And then because I don't want a knot, I'm going to go back into the middle of this project. I'm just going to drive that needle deep into the project, pop out anywhere. I'm going to cut the thread and let that relax. And what that did is that buried the very end of that thread somewhere in the middle of our ornament so you don't have a knot here that potentially from rubbing comes undone and causes the ornament to come open. And that's how we close our ornament. And then of course, if you decide that you want to be able to use that hanger, you could display that way. That's a lot of fun there with that ornament. One of the other things I wanted to mention to you was about our little shepherd here. In the book, and this is where I want to encourage you to veer away from the guidance there. In your kit, you're going to have a strip like this, and the book tells you to cut that to a much shorter length because as we look at the ornament here, this is actually just tied on. It's just a raw edge. When we trimmed our strip to be a lot shorter and then tried the knot, we ran into some challenges. So this is what's in your kit. You're going to trim this down to this size, and we just found it to be a lot simpler to tie a knot and a longer length of fabric, determine the length we like, right? You could even sew that on if you want, and then trim that to the desired length. You get the idea. It's always easier to have just a longer length to tie a knot on, and then trim it later. A ribbon's like that, any bow is like that, and then of course we just stitch that down. So you can see if you have been wanting to make some really special ornaments, so much of this work has been done for you with the tracing, the cutting of every single thing so that you can just focus on the fun, doing the machine applique, doing the beadwork, the button, and of course the hand embroidery and so much more. If you are like, all right, I'm convinced, then head over to the website now, take your friends with you. How fun to set up a date, a sewing date where you can get together for conversation and know you're going to get things done. Accountability buddies. I do it at the gym. It makes me get up and get to class. And the same is true for sewing as well. Hey, if you haven't subscribed, be sure to do that now. This is how you'll find out about new clubs, tutorials, and so much more. I'll see you soon on another video.